The sky of the ruined world was covered with dark smoke. Mountains of metal wrecks lay across the land. Broken pieces of ships that once sailed the stars. Captain Daniel walked carefully among the ruins, his boots sinking into the black dust. He was searching not for treasure, but for survivors. His scanner beeped slowly, showing a faint life sign deep inside the crash site. Daniel moved forward past twisted steel and burned walls. The air smelled of fire and old blood. This place had seen a terrible battle, but something inside told him he was not too late. The scanner grew louder, the signal was near. He climbed over a broken hull and entered a half-buried chamber. There in the dim light he saw her, a small alien girl, no older than a human child. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes large and filled with fear. She did not speak, her lips pressed tight as if silence was her only defense. Her hands shook as she tried to hide in the corner. Daniel raised his hands slowly, showing he had no weapon. "It's okay," he whispered. His voice soft, but she only stared, silent and unmoving. Then Daniel saw it in a collar around her neck, glowing faint blue, covered in strange symbols. He felt his chest grow heavy. The collar was not just decoration. It was a message. The symbols were old, but his translator might be able to read them. He pulled out his device and scanned the glowing words. As the translation appeared on his screen, his heart began to race. The first line read, "This child carries the memory of a lost people." Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. He looked at the girl again, her silent eyes begging him to understand. The next line appeared, "Protect her, or her world will remain dead forever." Daniel's eyes stung with sudden tears. Who had written these words, and why had they been placed on a collar? What kind of cruelty forced a child to wear her people's last message? Daniel knelt down, trying to hide his emotions. He wiped his face quickly, but the girl noticed the water in his eyes. For the first time, her expression softened. She slowly moved closer, still silent, still unsure. Her small fingers touched the collar, as if asking him to read more. Daniel swallowed hard and looked back at his screen. The translator struggled, the words were broken. But one phrase burned clearly. Only a human can unlock her fate. Daniel's mind shook with questions. Why a human? Why him? He had come as a rescuer. But now he felt something deeper. The girl was not only a survivor, she was a key to something greater than he could imagine. Suddenly a sharp noise echoed outside the chamber. Metal boots against metal ground. Daniel turned quickly, pulling the girl behind him. Voices in a harsh alien tongue called out, searching the wreck. Scavengers, or maybe hunters, they were close. The girl gripped his sleeve tightly. Her silent plea stronger than any scream. Daniel whispered, "Stay quiet. Stay with me." He led her through the broken passage. His heart beating fast, the hunters' voices grew nearer, heavy weapons clanking as they moved. If they found the girl, she would be taken, or worse. They reached a small gap in the wreckage, leading out to the dust plains. Daniel pushed her gently through, then followed. They crouched low behind the wreck as shadows passed above them. One of the hunters shouted, raising a scanner. Daniel held his breath, his hand ready on his sidearm. But the girl touched his arm, her collar glowing faintly. A wave of light spread for a moment, masking their heat signature. The scanner beeped in confusion, showing nothing. The hunters cursed and moved on, leaving the area. Daniel looked at the girl in shock. The collar had saved them. The girl lowered her head as if ashamed of the strange power. Daniel placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You saved us," he said softly. She looked up at him, still mute, but her eyes shone with a new spark of trust. For the first time, Daniel felt that he was not only her protector, he was her last hope. He led her away from the crash site, across the dust plains behind them. The wreck burned slowly, smoke rising into the dark sky. Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The collar carried secrets, the girl carried a destiny, and humanity was tied to it in ways he did not yet understand. As they walked, the collar pulsed once more. New words glowed faintly, half translated on his screen. Daniel read them under his breath, and again his eyes filled with tears. The message said, "When the last child weeps in silence, the human heart must answer." Daniel looked at the mute girl beside him and whispered, "I will answer." The ruined world was quiet now, but Daniel felt the weight of the universe pressing on him. The encounter was no accident, it was fate. And fate had only just begun to speak. The desert plain stretched endlessly, covered in red dust and broken stones. Captain Daniel walked carefully, keeping his eyes on the horizon. The mute alien girl followed close behind, her small steps leaving faint marks in the sand. Neither of them spoke, one could not. The other did not know what to say. The silence between them was heavy. Yet strangely alive, Daniel carried only a small pack. His water running low, the girl carried nothing. Only the glowing collar around her neck. Sometimes the collar flickered with faint light. As if listening, Daniel wondered if it was more than a translator. Maybe a guide, maybe even a guardian. The thought made him uneasy, but he could not ignore it. As the sun set, the air turned cold, the desert night arriving fast. Daniel stopped near the remains of an old outpost half buried in sand. He found shelter inside the cracked walls, lighting a small fire from scraps. The girl sat across from him, hugging her knees, eyes watching every movement. Her silence was not just fear, it was something deeper, a burden he could not yet see. Daniel took out his ration pack and placed it in front of her. She looked at it, then at him, unsure. He broke off a piece and ate it first, showing it was safe slowly. She reached out and took a small bite. Her eyes widened, not in joy but in relief, as if she had not eaten for days. For a moment, Daniel almost smiled. But the collar glowed again. This time, faint words appeared on his scanner. "Trust grows in silence," the message said. Daniel read it twice. The words felt strange, almost alive. Was the collar recording their bond? Or was it teaching them? The girl noticed his eyes, noticed the tears he tried to hide. Her own gaze softened, and she leaned closer to the fire, still mute. But her actions spoke louder than words. Daniel realized then that silence was not weakness. It was her shield, and slowly he began to understand her without sound. During the night, Daniel awoke to the sound of wind. The girl was standing at the broken doorway, staring at the stars. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the moonlight. For the first time, Daniel saw her not as a victim, but as something sacred, a survivor carrying the weight of a whole people. He walked to her side, whispering, "You're safe now." She turned, her large eyes filled with questions. Then she touched his arm lightly and pointed at the stars. Daniel followed her gesture, and there far above a faint light moved. It was not a star, it was a ship. Scanning the planet, Daniel's chest tightened. The hunters had not given up. The girl pulled at his sleeve, her eyes begging him to move. Daniel packed quickly, putting out the fire. They slipped into the night, walking across the desert under the cold stars. The bond between them no longer fragile. It was survival itself. At dawn, Daniel's strength began to fade. The desert seemed endless, no sign of water or shelter. But the girl walked ahead, her collar glowing brighter. She seemed to know where to go, leading him with silent certainty. Daniel followed, trusting her, though he did not know why. By noon, they reached a canyon filled with old machinery. Rusting towers stood like skeletons, forgotten relics of war. The girl climbed down first. Fearless, Daniel followed, scanning carefully for movement. In the shadows of the canyon, they found a small hidden chamber. Inside, symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly like her collar. Daniel's scanner hummed, translating slowly. The words filled his screen. "Here the bond is tested. Only trust will open the way." He looked at the girl, who placed her hand on the wall. The collar responded, sending light across the chamber. A hidden door opened with a low hum, revealing a safe chamber filled with supplies. Water, preserved food, and ancient tools, left long ago for someone who would come. Daniel felt his knees weaken in relief. The girl looked at him, her silence filled with meaning. Without her, he would never have survived the desert. That night they rested in the chamber, the first true safety since the crash site. Daniel sat near the girl, watching her sleep. Her collar glowed faintly even in dreams. As if guarding her, Daniel whispered softly, though she could not hear, "You're not alone anymore." For the first time, he believed his own words. But peace never lasted long. The next morning, a faint sound echoed through the canyon. Engines fast and brutal, hunters were closing in again. Daniel grabbed his pack, waking the girl. Her collar flared red for the first time, pulsing like a warning heart. They looked at each other, no words, only trust. Daniel took her hand firmly, leading her through the hidden passages. The silent bond between them had grown, unspoken but unbreakable. And as the hunter's shadows drew nearer, Daniel knew one truth. He was no longer protecting her out of duty, but out of something far greater. The collar glowed once more as they fled, leaving a final message on his scanner. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is the beginning of trust. Daniel read the words as he held the girl close, and deep inside he understood. Their bond was not just survival, it was destiny. The canyon was quiet again, but Captain Daniel knew the silence would not last. The hunters were searching every valley, every ruin, their engines echoing across the desert skies. The mute alien girl walked beside him, her collar glowing faintly like a hidden star. Daniel's thoughts were heavy. The collar was more than metal, more than memory. It was a voice of the past, and it was speaking directly to him. As they reached higher ground, Daniel activated his scanner again. The collar shimmered with new symbols, as if waiting for the right moment. Slowly, the words translated across his screen, broken and incomplete, carriers of truth. Betrayed by the false ones, the message read. Daniel frowned, the meaning was half lost, but the weight of it pressed against his chest. He looked at the girl, her silver skin catching the pale light of dawn. She stared back, her silence steady, yet her eyes asked questions he could not answer. Daniel whispered, "Your people blamed humans, didn't they?" The girl lowered her gaze, the collar flickering as if agreeing. Daniel's heart sank. Had humanity once been their enemy? Or had someone twisted the truth? The message continued, letters glowing brighter. Only the heart of man can open the final memory. Daniel froze. The words repeated in his head. Why him? Why humans? What link bound them to this silent child? He wanted answers, but the collar only gave pieces of a broken puzzle. That night, they camped inside an old wreck half buried in sand. Daniel sat near the fire, staring at the collar's glow. The girl curled close to the warmth, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Daniel studied the symbols, tracing them with his eyes, and then his breath caught. One of the names etched faintly into the collar was his own family name. His hand shook, the letters were clear. No mistranslation. The girl stirred, sensing his fear, her wide eyes following his trembling hands. Daniel whispered to himself, "This can't be real." Was his bloodline tied to her people? Had humans once promised to protect them? And if so, why had that promise ended in silence and war? Before he could think further, the ground trembled with distant engines. The hunters were back, closer this time. Daniel quickly packed, lifting the girl to her feet. They slipped through the wreck, moving into the desert once more. The collar pulsed red, warning them of danger. Hours later, they hid in a cave at the edge of the canyon. Daniel crouched low, his sidearm ready. The girl pressed against the wall, silent, her collar flickering nervously. Through the narrow gap, Daniel saw shadows pass, armored figures scanning the area. One of them spoke in a deep alien voice. "The key is near. Find the child." Daniel clenched his jaw. They were not just hunters, they knew about her. The girl trembled. Clutching her collar, the glow flared suddenly, projecting a burst of light onto the cave wall. Symbols and images appeared, spinning in the air like a memory crystal. Daniel stared as the scene unfolded. Ships burning, cities falling, children screaming in silence. The girl closed her eyes, unable to watch. Daniel felt his stomach twist. The images were her past, her people's tragedy, and in the middle of it, a human figure stood with alien leaders, the hologram blurred. But Daniel recognized something. The human was wearing a badge with his family crest. His bloodline had once stood with them, not as destroyers but as allies. The hunters outside grew restless, smashing rocks, moving closer to the cave. Daniel turned back to the projection, desperate for more answers. The collar glowed brighter, showing one final phrase before the light dimmed. "Humanity must remember, or the silence will last forever." Daniel's eyes burned, not just with fear but with anger. He realized then, someone had erased this truth, twisted history. Humanity had not betrayed her people, but someone had made it look that way. The girl opened her eyes, her silent gaze meeting his for the first time. Daniel felt her trust completely. She knew he believed her now, even without words. The hunters entered the cave, flashlights cutting through the dark. Daniel grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her deeper inside. Blaster fire sparked off the walls, rocks collapsing around them. The girl pressed her collar, and a shield of light flared, blocking the blasts. Daniel fired back, his shots echoing as they escaped through a narrow tunnel. Outside, the desert wind howled, covering their trail. Daniel and the girl ran until their legs burned. Only when the stars returned overhead did they stop. Gasping for breath, Daniel looked at the collar again. "Its glow now calm," he whispered. I don't know why, but my family is part of this. The girl touched his hand gently, her silence carrying more comfort than words. Daniel squeezed her fingers, determination filling his heart. He would uncover the truth no matter the cost. The collar had given him fragments, but the full secret was still locked, and the key lay not in the desert, but among the stars as they stared at the night sky. The collar flickered with one final message. Her fate is bound to yours, and yours to the stars. Daniel read the words aloud, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. The girl's silent eyes reflected the starlight, and Daniel knew the real journey was only beginning. The desert could no longer hide them, the hunters knew. The galaxy itself seemed to whisper of their presence. Captain Daniel led the mute alien girl to his ship, hidden inside a canyon cave. The old freighter was scarred with battles and patched with worn metal, but it could still fly. He powered the engines, the roar echoing through the cliffs, and the ship rose into the dark sky. The girl sat beside him, her wide eyes staring through the cockpit window. She had never seen space like this, endless and alive, stars glittering like 1,000 eyes. Her collar glowed faintly, responding to the void beyond. Daniel's hands tightened on the controls. Leaving the planet was only the first step. The real danger would come in the stars. Moments later, the ship's sensors screamed. 3 enemy crafts appeared on the radar, fast and sharp like knives cutting the darkness. The hunters had followed, tracking them through space. Daniel cursed under his breath and pulled the ship into a dive. The girl clutched her seat, silent but calm, as if she had already seen such danger before. Blaster fire lit up the void, streaks of red chasing their hull. Daniel twisted the ship, engines groaning under the pressure. "Hold on," he muttered, the girl's collar flaring bright as if shielding them. For a moment the blasts curved aside, missing their ship. Daniel's heart skipped. The collar was protecting them even here in the void. The hunters grew angrier, their voices crackling through the comms. "Deliver the child, human, and you may live," one snarled. Daniel shut off the channel, jaw clenched, no bargain, no surrender. Not while she sat beside him. The girl glanced at him, her silence filled with trust. He punched the hyperdrive. Stars stretched into lines of light. The ship jumped, tearing them away from the hunters, at least for now. When the stars returned, they were deep in uncharted space. Daniel exhaled, sweat dripping from his brow. But relief faded quickly because the collar was glowing again. Stronger than ever, a projection burst from the collar, filling the cockpit with ghostly light. It showed a star map shifting and alive. Daniel stared in shock. The collar was guiding them somewhere. The girl touched the map, pointing to a single star system glowing brighter than the rest. Her eyes pleaded with him, though her lips stayed silent. Daniel hesitated, but then nodded. "We go where you lead." The ship turned, engines humming toward the star system. As they traveled, the girl grew restless, drawing shapes on the glass with her finger. She drew towers, cities, and strange symbols, her memories spilling into simple sketches. Daniel realized she was showing him her lost home. Piece by piece, her silence was breaking, not with words, but with pictures. Daniel felt a bond deeper than language forming, yet fear lingered in his chest. For every memory she revealed, someone wanted buried, and those someones were chasing them across the stars. He knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up. Hours later, the radar beeped again. The hunters had returned, their ships faster, hungrier. Daniel's freighter shook as blaster fire tore through the void. The girl pressed her collar, light erupting once more. This time, it formed a protective barrier around the ship, shimmering like a living shield. Daniel's eyes widened as the blast bent away, but the collar's glow weakened, its energy fading with each hit. The girl's face grew pale, her hands trembling. She was giving her own strength to keep them alive. Daniel grabbed her hand, shouting, "Stop! You'll burn yourself out." She looked at him, silent. But her eyes said everything. She would not stop. The hunters closed in, preparing for a final strike. Daniel's mind raced. He remembered an old trick. He cut the engine suddenly, letting the freighter drift. The hunters shot past, overshooting their target. With the last of the collar's shield fading, Daniel reignited the engines. He spun the ship, firing every cannon he had left. One hunter ship exploded in a burst of fire. The others pulled back, cautious now, but still watching. Daniel growled, "Run back to your masters. Tell them she's not theirs." The girl sagged against the seat. Exhausted, Daniel caught her, his chest tight with worry. The collar dimmed, but still glowed faintly, whispering new words across his scanner. "The heir must live. The bond must hold. Daniel read the message. His heart pounding, he looked down at the girl, her eyes closed but her hand still gripping his sleeve. She was more than a survivor now, more than a mystery. She was the last of something greater, and enemies would never stop chasing her. Daniel swore to himself, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." The stars stretched out ahead, endless and dangerous as the freighter slipped into shadow. The collar flickered one more time, a final phrase appeared. Chilling and clear, "She is the key, and you are the lock." Daniel shivered, staring into the starlight. For the first time he feared not the hunters, but the truth waiting to be revealed. The freighter drifted in silence, hidden between the shadows of two dead moons. Captain Daniel sat in the cockpit, eyes heavy from no rest. Beside him, the alien girl slept curled against the seat, her collar dim but still alive with faint light. Daniel studied the last message again on his scanner. "She is the key and you are the lock," it said. The words haunted him. Why him, why humans? The collar spoke of destiny, but he was only a soldier. A man who had lost his home years ago. And yet, when he looked at the girl, he knew her survival meant more than either of them understood. He leaned back, whispering, "I'll find the truth, even if it kills me." When the girl woke, she was quiet as always, but her eyes were softer now. No longer filled with fear, she trusted him. Daniel could feel it, even if she had never spoken a word. He handed her water and she drank slowly, then pointed to the star map still glowing faintly in the air. Her finger traced a path toward a system Daniel had once heard only in whispers. Valaris. Valaris was a dead world, a graveyard of empires. Few dared to travel there. And those who did never returned. Daniel frowned. "That's where you want to go?" he asked softly. The girl nodded once. Her collar pulsing with confirmation, Daniel sighed, knowing the journey would draw every enemy closer. But he had no choice. The ship jumped through hyperspace, stars stretching like silver lines during the long passage. Daniel explored the storage chamber of the freighter. There, among his old crates, the girl found paper and chalk. She began to draw on the walls, her silence breaking through images. She drew cities with shining towers, people with the same silver skin, children laughing. Daniel watched, realizing she was showing him her lost world. But then her hand slowed and she drew flames, ships falling from the sky and shadows with sharp teeth. Finally, she drew human, or something wearing human armor, standing among the ruins. Daniel's chest tightened, the same lie again. Humanity painted as destroyers. The girl looked at him, her eyes filled with sorrow, as if asking if it was true. Daniel knelt beside her, taking the chalk. He drew beside her picture, rough and clumsy. He drew a human standing not with the shadows, but with her people, hand extended. The girl stared at his drawing, her eyes wide, then, slowly, she smiled for the first time. The collar glowed in response, projecting a new message. "Truth is memory. Memory is blood," it said. Daniel's scanner translated more lines. "The air of Valaris carries the bond. The lock rests in human veins." Daniel froze, his pulse racing. The collar was not only a message, it was a genetic lock. It could sense bloodlines, and his family name on its surface was no accident. Somewhere in his blood was the key to her survival. The girl reached out, touching his chest lightly, as if she understood before he did. Daniel whispered, "You are the last heir, aren't you?" Her silence answered him, her collar flaring bright for only a moment. She was more than a survivor, more than a child. She was the last heir of her people, a living symbol of a world destroyed, and Daniel was tied to her fate, through history, through blood, through promises made long before he was born. The truth hit him like a storm. Her enemies were not chasing her. They were chasing what she represented. Suddenly, alarm screamed through the freighter. The hunters had returned faster than before. Daniel cursed, pulling the girl into the cockpit. 3 ships surrounded them, their weapons hot and ready. The comm crackled, a voice booming, "Deliver the air, human, and we may let you live." Daniel's hands shook with anger. "Never," he growled, turning the freighter sharply. Blaster fire rained down, the ship shuddering. Sparks flying across the panels. The girl pressed her collar. Light spilling into the cabin, but this time, instead of a shield, the collar projected a code into the ship's systems. Daniel's screen lit up with strange coordinates. "An escape route," he muttered. Realizing the collar was guiding them, he slammed the controls. The freighter dove between the hunters, slipping through their fire. Engines screamed as they pushed toward the new path. The girl held tight to his sleeve, her eyes steady despite the chaos. The ship raced through a field of shattered asteroids. Hunters crashed and burned against the rocks. Too reckless to follow, Daniel weaved through the debris, every second feeling like his last. Finally, they burst free, stars opening ahead of them. The hunters were gone for now. Daniel collapsed back in his seat. Chest heaving, the girl sat beside him, her collar glowing faintly again. He stared at her, whispering, "You're not just a survivor. You're the future of your people." Her silence answered with more power than words. The bond between them had grown unbreakable, forged in fire and trust. The collar flickered once more, leaving a final message across his screen. "The heir must live, or the lie will rule forever." Daniel read the words aloud. His jaw tight with resolve, he looked at the girl, her eyes bright with silent hope, and he swore again, "You will live. I'll make sure of it." Ahead, the stars of Valeris glowed faintly, waiting for them. Daniel felt the weight of destiny pulling stronger. The lost truth was no longer just her secret, it was his as well, and together, they would uncover it no matter how many hunters came. The stars of Valeris glimmered ahead, cold and distant. Captain Daniel guided the freighter closer. His jaw tight with focus, the mute alien girl sat beside him, her collar glowing faintly as if recognizing the system. Daniel felt a chill. This was the place her people had once called home. Now it was a graveyard, silent and waiting. The ship entered orbit, the planet below covered in endless ruins. Black scars of war stretched across continents, cities reduced to ash and stone. Daniel's heart sank as he saw the destruction. The girl pressed her small hand against the glass, her eyes wide with sorrow. She was seeing her world again. "Not alive, but broken," Daniel whispered. "I'll help you bring the truth back." But before hope could rise, alarm screamed through the freighter. Another ship had followed them. Larger and more powerful, it hailed them. A familiar voice crackling through the comms. "Daniel." "It's me." Daniel froze, recognizing the voice of Marcus, a former comrade from years past. Marcus had once been a soldier like him, trusted and skilled. But his sudden appearance here sent unease through Daniel's chest. "How did you find us?" Daniel asked sharply. Marcus laughed softly. "Old friends are never far, and neither are their debts." The girl shifted uncomfortably, her collar flickering red as if warning them. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. Marcus continued, "Hand over the child, Daniel. You don't know what you're carrying." His words were calm, almost gentle, but filled with poison. "The hunters are not your enemy. You're protecting the real threat." Daniel's blood boiled. "She's not a threat, she's the last hope of her people." Marcus sighed. "You still don't understand, do you?" The comm crackled with static before his voice returned colder. "This girl carries more than memory. She carries power that entire empires want. If you protect her, you doom humanity itself." The girl looked at Daniel, her silent eyes begging him not to believe. The collar pulsed with light, projecting symbols into the cabin again. Daniel's scanner translated, "Do not trust the false brother. His tongue is poisoned." Daniel clenched his jaw. Marcus was lying, twisting the truth, but why? What had turned his old comrade into this? Marcus's ship fired a warning shot, shaking the freighter. "Daniel, listen to me. Hand her over and walk away alive." The girl pressed against Daniel's arm. Silent but firm, her collar glowed brighter, almost as if it was fighting Marcus's presence. Daniel shouted back, "If you were ever my brother, you'd know I can't do that." The battle began. Marcus's ship unleashed heavy fire, the freighter rattling under each strike. Daniel dove through the ruins of orbiting debris, using the wreckage as cover. The girl activated her collar, shields sparking around them. But weaker this time, Daniel fired back, his cannons flashing against Marcus's stronger hull. Through the chaos, Marcus's voice filled the comm again. "You don't see it, Daniel. They lied to us all. Humanity was framed, yes, but protecting her will make things worse. Her collar doesn't only hold memory, it holds control. Control of weapons that could end everything." Daniel hesitated. His breath catching. Was Marcus speaking truth, or another layer of lies? The girl shook her head fiercely, her silent voice clear through her eyes. She touched her collar, projecting one last vision into the cockpit. It showed her people gathering with humans long ago. Hand in hand, the collar's words appeared. Alliance, not war. Daniel's heart steadied. Marcus was wrong. The truth was here. Daniel spun the freighter sharply. Flying low into Valeris's thick clouds, Marcus followed, firing relentlessly. Lightning split the skies, storms raging over the dead world. Daniel weaved between ruined towers rising from the mist. Each shot from Marcus tore stone into dust. Finally, Daniel spotted an old defense bunker still half intact. He dove the freighter inside, crashing through its shattered roof. The ship skidded to a halt, smoke filling the air. Marcus's ship circled outside. Unable to enter for now, they had a moment of breath. Daniel leaned against the controls. Sweat dripping, the girl touched his hand. Her eyes filled with both fear and strength. Her collar glowed faintly, showing another phrase. The false brother will return. But betrayal opens the path. Daniel read it, his chest heavy with dread. Marcus's voice echoed once more through the calm. You can't hide forever, Daniel, when the truth burns you. You'll come back to me. The channel went dead. Leaving only silence, Daniel looked at the girl, her small hand still gripping his sleeve. He whispered, I won't betray you, not ever. The storm outside roared, lightning shaking the ruins of Valaris. Daniel knew Marcus would not stop. The hunters would not stop. But the collar was guiding them toward something greater. The truth was close, and betrayal had only made the path clearer. The heir of Valaris was still alive, and Daniel swore to keep her so. The storm over Valaris raged like an endless roar. Lightning flashed across the dead towers. Broken monuments of a people long gone inside the bunker. Captain Daniel prepared for the final fight. The mute alien girl sat beside him, her collar glowing brighter than ever before. It was no longer faint, no longer weak. It pulsed like a living heart. Daniel stared at her, his breath heavy. She was not just a child, not just a survivor. She was the last heir of Valaris, the last voice of a people erased by lies. And now her silence was about to break. Daniel knew it. Even if he could not explain why, above them, Marcus's ship descended through the storm. Its engines screamed, weapons primed for destruction. His voice boomed across the comms, sharp and merciless. Daniel, this is your last chance. Hand her over and you can walk away alive. But Daniel only tightened his grip on his weapon. The girl pressed her hand against his arm, her silver eyes steady. Her collar flared, projecting images into the bunker walls. Visions of her people's last stand, ships burning, voices silenced. But then came something new. Humans standing beside them, fighting and falling together. Daniel's eyes widened, his family crest glowing in the vision once more. The collar translated a final phrase. Humanity was our shield, not our destroyer. Daniel's chest shook, his tears hot against his face. The truth was undeniable now. Her people had been betrayed not by humans, but by those who feared the bond between them. Marcus was only a tool of that greater lie. The bunker shook as Marcus fired again, stone crumbling. Daniel pulled the girl close, whispering, This ends here. He activated the last cannons of the freighter. Blasting through the roof, Marcus's ship reeled but fired back. Filling the storm with fire, the sky itself seemed to split under their battle. The girl stood suddenly, her collar glowing so bright it blinded the room. Daniel shouted for her to stop, but the light grew stronger. It formed into a shield around the bunker, protecting them from Marcus's fire. But then the collar changed, projecting a beam into the sky. The clouds above ripped open, revealing an ancient station hidden in orbit. Daniel gasped. The station was massive. Built by her people long ago, it had been waiting, locked away. For the heir to return, the collar pulsed. Connecting to the station, its weapons lit up, firing at Marcus's ship with deadly precision. Explosions shook the storm, flames tearing the sky. Marcus's ship staggered, half destroyed, his voice filled with fury. You don't understand, Daniel. She carries power no one should control. Daniel fired back through the comm. She carries truth, Marcus, and something you gave up long ago. The girl raised her hand, and the collar unleashed one final surge. Marcus's ship was engulfed in light, vanishing into the storm. Silence followed, heavy and endless. The bunker walls glowed faintly as the collar dimmed again. The girl collapsed into Daniel's arms, her body weak but alive. Daniel held her tightly, whispering, It's over, you're safe now. But even as he said it, he knew the journey was not finished. The collar flickered once more, its last message appearing. The bond is complete. The heir has spoken. Daniel frowned. Spoken, but she had not said a word. Then slowly the girl opened her mouth, her voice soft and fragile. She whispered in broken human tongue, Thank you. Daniel froze, his heart trembling. Tears filled his eyes again, not from pain but from hope. Her silence was broken, not fully, but enough. She had chosen her first words in humanity's language, and that choice meant everything. The storm outside began to fade, the skies clearing. The ancient station hovered above, no longer a weapon but a beacon. The truth had returned to the galaxy, carried by the last heir and the human who believed her. Daniel looked at the girl, smiling through his tears. "You're not alone anymore, and neither is humanity," he said. The girl leaned against him, her eyes closing in peace. The collar dimmed at last, its purpose fulfilled. For the first time since the crash, silence felt gentle, not heavy. Daniel looked out at the horizon of Valaris, ruins glowing in the morning light. A new dawn was rising, but deep inside, Daniel knew this was not just an ending, it was a beginning. The galaxy had been fed lies for too long now. With the air alive and the truth revealed, humanity would rise again as protectors, not enemies. Daniel swore he would carry that truth to the stars. The final words of the collar lingered in his mind like fire. When the last child weeps in silence, the human heart must answer. Daniel had answered, and in doing so, he had changed everything. He held the girl close as the freighter prepared to rise again, and for the first time, both of them looked to the future with hope.